It is not often you see an All-American football player, the boy next door, so to speak, being led out of a courtroom in cuffs, being called a murderer, and making plans to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Even though maybe somewhere down the pike after decades, he might just be freed on parole. That's Riley Gall, and that's what's happening on your screen right now. Just within the last few moments, a guilty verdict came down in this stunning case where he shot a gun into the wall of his ex-girlfriend's home, aiming right for her bed. Not just her bed, her pillow. Not once from one side of the house outside, but twice from the other side of the house outside. Both of those shots were aimed at her pillow, and one of those shots hit her in the head, killing her. She was just 16 years old, Emma Walker, and she had such a promising future, and she was, I think we can all agree, stunning. By all accounts, adorable, delightful, life of the party. In fact, it was at several parties where she felt threatened by Riley because he was stalking her and terrorizing her. He tried to tell this jury that it was because he was trying to win her back into his arms, scare her back into his arms. Well, if that was the plan, it went wrong, and the jury didn't believe it anyway. That young woman is dead. And that picture of the All-American girl with her All-American boyfriend, well, it's a lie. It's a lie because he's a murderer and she's dead. And that young man now looks like something else. Now looks like an inmate who's put on maybe 30 pounds, maybe 40. He doesn't look at all what he looked like before. And that's what happens when you spend your time, doing the prison food line. And that's what's going to happen. He'll be going to mess to get his lunches and his dinners and his breakfasts with the rest of the inmates for almost the rest of his life, if he gets parole. Back with me, my panel, Jesse Weber and Rachel Stockman from Law and Crime Network, and also Brian Claypool, a defense attorney who's seen this happen a thing or two a few times in your career, where no matter how hard you try, Brian, no matter what defense you put forth, sometimes you can just feel it in your bones when you look at that jury, when you look at their faces, when you see them roll their eyes, when you see them drop their heads, when you see them look away and not meet your eyes. How many times have you watched that jury walk away and render a verdict that you knew was coming because of how they would or wouldn't look at you?
Well, Ashley, it just happened to me, 6 months ago in the Dalia DiPolito case, in the middle of the trial, or toward the end of the trial, where a piece of evidence came in. It was prior bad act evidence, an allegation of Dalia trying to poison her ex-husband in his chai tea latte. And I got to tell you, almost every juror looked down, and Dalia and I had, we had a conversation after that, and we felt like it was probably over there. That issue is up on appeal, by the way. But if I can make a comment about this case real quick. Every good defense lawyer has to assess the playing field and call an audible if need be. And in this case, I think this young man's lawyers failed to call proper audibles on two counts, Ashley.
Where? Where?
Well, number one, they should have been trying to cop out a plea in this case. I mean, these facts were not in their favor. And they should have, I'd like to find out post-trial whether they tried to negotiate a plea deal for this young man.
You know what, Brian? I would not be surprised if they didn't offer one. They had so many facts in their corner, the kinds that we call bad facts. They may not have wanted to offer one.
Well, then let's go to my second point then, because you might be right. My second point is this, and you made a great point in the first segment, which is we as criminal defense lawyers, we've got to dig down as deep as we can to come up with the best arguments for our clients. And what his lawyers should have been arguing are things like he had diminished capacity. This guy's 19. He plays football. Maybe he wasn't mature enough. He should have had a mental health exam. Maybe getting hit in the head for the last 7 years playing football had something to do with this. Maybe it was heat of passion because he lost the love of his life and he couldn't live any longer. His lawyers should have been making those arguments instead of this was reckless homicide, because that's a contradiction. In opening statement, his lawyer said, hey, wait, you're going to hear facts. My client shot this young lady. He did really bad things, but it was an error. It was negligent. That is a contradiction.
He tried, but you know what? Some of these bad facts kept creeping in and knocking that down. Hey, by the way, just in case our audience is wondering, you often hear that cases are won or lost in openings. And if it's not the case, you hear they're won or lost in closings. And closings happened right before this verdict. So if you're wondering what the last thing that jury heard before they had to make this decision of guilty was, here's the prosecutor.
Kevin Walker in this case was asleep in her bed. He knew it. In and out of that window, sneaking in and out. You wouldn't have to spend 10 seconds in that room to know where Emma slept and where her head would be at night. Having walked into her backyard and stood right up behind her wall and placed the bullet into the hole where you knew her head would be. This was calculated. This was targeted.
Pretty strong. So what would you do if you were the defense attorney? This is what his defense attorney said.
But I do want to say, before I move on to the next slide, is that for all the reasons that I've mentioned, and I could think of more, Riley Gall did not have the intent to kill her, did not have the desire to kill her. And I want to say everything the state says about him getting the gun, traveling to Cardinal and firing the first shot is consistent with him trying to get her attention.
So it didn't matter what he said because they decided they didn't believe him. Maybe one of the last things, Rachel and Jesse, was Call of Duty, because that was something I learned today that shocked me, that the prosecutors say Riley didn't know when he stood 5 feet away from the wall of a house that the bullet would go through. Riley didn't know. Riley played Call of Duty, a very realistic game that would teach you a little bit about guns and how they work. A very realistic game. It is not a fantasy game. The defense attorney said, well, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous that he would learn from Call of Duty. I don't think it is. You play Call of Duty.
I do. It's called wall banging.
Wall banging.
Wall banging.
It's a strategy.
It's a strategy. You see it in the video right here, especially when you're playing against other players. You shoot the other opponent through the wall. So now the question is, the defense is saying, oh, well, you can't translate that into firing a real firearm. But that's not the issue. The issue was, did you know a bullet could go through a wall? Now,
well, yeah, because the defense was saying he had no understanding of this particular weapon and didn't know that it had the capability to go through a wall and hit someone.
Yeah, wall bangers know it goes through the wall.
Wall bangers know. And I'm just going to say, if you're watching right now and you think this is stupid, how could you? Let's remember we're talking about a 19-year-old young man. All right. And what informs a 19-year-old? Not the same stuff that we all know. We've been through the ringer. We've been through court cases. We've been through horrible, tragedies at 9/11. Everything else informs us. OK, a 19-year-old is informed by very few things: a pretty girl, your time in class, trigonometry, prom, winning the game, your friends, sneaking a beer, playing Call of Duty. It was not informed by going shooting with his grandfather. That was never brought up. The prosecutors would have made great hay of that had he spent a bunch of time shooting guns with his grandfather, but they didn't. Instead, he knew Call of Duty and he knew wall banging, the kind of strategy where you shoot through a wall to get your kill. That is something that informed this 19-year-old.
And that's why I think it's particularly shocking that the defense was that he was just trying to scare her, because you have the Call of Duty issues, and then you have the fact, too, and we showed them over and over again, that evidence photo of how close, just feet away from her head, when he fired those
5
bullets.
feet away. Okay, can you guys come back in about 30 minutes? I have a whole lot more on this trial that I want to cover with you, because it's just still breaking. We're still getting news from the courtroom. We're still getting reaction from the family. So if you guys can come back, I got to kind of threw the whole show out. We're just going to do it breaking news style. We'll see you in about a half hour. Brian Claypool, you can't go anywhere either. You're going to stick around too, because there's also this. A married teacher